Why was education important to the early republic's economy? What do you think? What did you talk about with your groups? I heard some great things. Peter?
I think education was important to the economy because some jobs required education, and then they would earn money, and some of that would go to taxes in America.
That's a great point. Excellent. Felix?
Like the leaders of the country that would make the decisions with the economy. If they didn't have education, then our economy would be bad.
That's another good point. Could someone read this slide for all of us nice and loud? Emery, go ahead.
In the 1800s, the U.S. needed lots of teachers to educate its citizens in public schools. The government even opened special schools for men and women to train teachers. These schools were called normal schools. Teaching was one of the only careers open to women in the early republic. The work of these dedicated women helped the nation to prepare its citizens to contribute to the nation's economy and civic life.
Excellent, yes. So like we mentioned yesterday, public schools became widespread at this time and teaching became an important job. And today we're going to talk about other important jobs that existed during the early republic. Today's activator was helpful because we had been talking about education in the early republic, and it was kind of a good segue to the next few lessons, which are about the industries and jobs in the early republic, so they could make this connection to how learning affected the economy and kind of refresh what they learned in the previous lesson. What's the question word in this big question? Maho? Who, exactly, who. So we're gonna be focusing on the who, the people that benefited and were harmed by the economy. Are there any other key words in this question that you think are gonna be really important? What do you think, Zach?
I have two.
Okay.
I think benefited and harmed.
And what does benefit mean?
Benefit means like how did it work out good for,
Yes, is a positive result. And what does harmed mean?
like it's hard to describe, but like harmed means like not a positive result.
Right, it can create a negative consequence. Any other key words from this question you think are going to be really important? Matt? The early United States. I think there's one more that's really important. What do you think? Marlena? Economy. And what does economy mean?
Like the money of America.
Exactly. So we're talking about who benefited and who was harmed by how the early republic kind of made its money. I wanted them to really have that question in the forefront of their mind, who is benefited and who is harmed, so that when they do their research over the next few days, they're really thinking about that as they research their specific industry. You are now going to come up with smaller questions that are going to help us answer this big question. Who benefited and who was harmed by the economy of the early republic? So with your table groups together, you can work as a team. I want you to try to come up with at least 2 questions that will help answer this bigger question. Each question will go on one sticky note, so 1 question per sticky note, so then we can share them at the end and put them up on the board and keep track of all these great questions. So collaborate with one another. You can go ahead and get started. 2 small questions that will help us answer the supporting question. Go ahead. Today I wanted to make sure they were really focusing on the economy. So when I asked the students for keywords, I was really happy that a student said economy, so we could review what that meant and highlight it. When they made smaller supporting questions for the bigger supporting question, they could really focus on the economy. I thought it would be helpful to kind of hint that we're going to be looking at different industries, so they could have that in the forefront of their mind. So then when I was walking around, I tried to mention industries and jobs to redirect their questions to be about the new topic. Who do you think benefited from that?
But the stores who are making profit off of their business.
Right. And do you think anyone was harmed by that?
I don't know. Maybe
That could be a question. Were people harmed by shopkeepers selling things in stores?
I think it depends on what the product is.
I agree.
If it's something that might be maybe like a cigarette or...
Marlena, that's an excellent question. Excellent.
were about like your primary education.
Who was harmed by the economy? I saw a lot of people write great questions about education. And I also saw people write some great questions about different kinds of jobs. So I'd love to hear a mixture of all of these. Marlena, want to start us off?
Did they bring more enslaved people from Africa to America to make the economy bigger?
Other questions? Matt?
What was the primary source of economy for the early republic, and who was harmed and benefited by that?
That's a great question. What was the primary source of the economy? Peter?
Who was taxed the most?
How would that affect the economy?
Because if more people went to the U.S., then there would be more taxes, and then those taxes could go into the economy, and then the economy could get bigger.
Very nice. Other question? Zach?
What made the economy bigger in value?
I'll take that.
I got
Oh, do you want to read your second? You can just do one.
that was my second.
Excellent. Other questions? I saw so many good ones. Emery, you have another?
What did teachers teach in schools? Was it just basic math and reading and things, or was it what we learned today?
Very nice. I like that. I'm wondering that too. Maho?
Were anyone excluded from education?
Were people excluded from education? And a lot of students on their sticky notes wrote about slavery and the experience of enslaved people, which we had talked a lot about with cotton and the invention of the cotton gin. So it was great they're making connections between previous lessons and the new topic of different industries in the early republic. In order to help us answer these questions, over the next few days, we're going to do a project where you're going to become an expert in a specific industry. So first, let's make sure you understand what both of those words mean. The first word I just said was industry. Could someone read the definition of industry before? Well, first of all, show thumbs up if you've heard this word before, industry. Okay. Could someone read the definition? Matt, go ahead.
Jobs and businesses centered around a particular product or service.
Good. In this example, Katie is a chef and Eddie is a waiter, so they both work in the restaurant industry. Now, the second word I said is expert. Could someone read the definition of expert, please?
A person who has special skill or knowledge relating to a particular subject.
Excellent. And the example here, Professor Reynolds was an expert on the Cherokee Nation's efforts to resist encroachment on their lands. So you're going to become an expert in an industry, a specific job that people would have had in the early republic. And some of the jobs are very different from jobs we have today. Some of the jobs you may not even have heard of before, like whaling. We don't have that really that much anymore. What about canal building? Nope. So you need to read about it first to get a little background information about what your industry is, and then you're going to answer a few questions to make predictions about your industry. Are there any people who worked in the whaling industry that you think were harmed?
The people who killed the whales, because
Probably dangerous.
it was dangerous. It's dangerous, and if they keep killing whales for a while or longer, they could go extinct, and then their industry would have a huge downfall.
Right. A lot of the students in specific industries, especially when they're talking about whaling or shipbuilding or canal building, they're really focusing on who benefited, and some of them were having a hard time thinking about who might be harmed. I think because kids just might not know a ship journey is really dangerous, and that can be something that could harm potential workers. I tried to explain little bits about the industry so they could get a better picture in their mind of all the different roles and all the different kinds of jobs people could have, so they could better visualize who benefited and who was harmed in that specific industry. And I even saw one group that had a student with specific learning needs where one student offered to read it all to them. So I was really intentional about who I knew was helpful and supportive, and making sure the groups were really fair and accommodating.
Show resilience, fight for their rights, and resist oppression if needed. Why and how? Well,
Can I ask you a question? First, who did you guys say would benefit from the overseas trade with China? Who do you think benefited?
Probably the workers, because the Chinese people were getting the drugs, and then the workers, and then the Chinese really wanted it, and then they would pay a lot, and the workers would get paid.
The American workers?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so the American people who worked on the trade ships. Do you think anyone was harmed in this industry?
Maybe while they were like going overseas, like basically around the world, they could be in bad conditions because they're on the boat the whole time.
That's a good point. So the workers on the boat, that's a good one. If there were workers in this industry who are being poorly treated, do you think they're going to try to stand up for themselves or no?
I think maybe if an African American was free and they maybe had they maybe got a job there, I think maybe people who did not approve of who did not approve of free African Americans would probably mistreat them, and that would lead to them probably showing resistance and resilience.
Yeah.
That's very thoughtful. You're going to find out tomorrow. You're on a roll. Keep going. You're doing a great job. Do you think people were harmed in canal building? What do you think, Court? A lot of people would benefit. Do you think there's any people in that industry who were harmed?
Maybe enslaved people were forced to leave.
Maybe.
I think the shopkeeper would be benefited, and some people would be harmed, if someone relied on having credit to buy stuff. And then, do you think that the workers in this industry show resilience and fight for their rights to resist oppression if needed? Why? I think they would, because they probably earn credit
By working?
And then for people who are connected, farmers, enslaved people, factory owners, overseas merchants, shopkeeper, and factory worker.
Nice. There's a lot of people connected to general store, right? Tell us the name of your industry and who you think benefited in your industry and who you think was harmed. Matt?
I think the boat staff were benefited because they got the money which would help their lives in many different ways.
Yes.
And I think the African Americans were harmed because they would be transported to auctions or from Africa to America to be put into very low wages.
That's very thoughtful. Thank you.
When they sold a drug made by poppy flowers to the Chinese, then they would get more money and it could help them. And then I think the Chinese people who were buying the drug were harmed because it could be bad for them.
Right. That's a good point. Excellent. This was a great start. I'm so excited for tomorrow where you're going to learn even more about your industry and start making a poster with your groups. Excellent job.